So, I've been reviewing horror games all month, and we've probably got time for at least one more. So let's talk about Puppet House. If you're someone who gets a kick out of the retro horror aesthetic and has a bit of a masochistic love for puzzles, it might be your thing. It's got everything you could possibly hope for. A killer puppet, a haunted mansion, and enough puzzles to make you question every life choice that led you here. Developed by Vecube Studio and Spirit Game Studio, Puppet House is an unapologetic love letter to 80s and 90s horror, all wrapped up in a puzzle-heavy escape room adventure. You're Detective Rick, an average guy with an above-average number of missing person cases piling up in his hometown. All the leads point to one place, an old mansion once owned by the late ventriloquist Peter Hill. Yeah, sounds like a bad idea, right? Well, that's the whole point. This mansion is crawling with unsettling vibes and, of course, a murderous puppet. Arguably my least favourite type of puppet. Rick's investigation quickly turns into a fight for survival, all with a side of puzzle solving that will either have you feeling like Sherlock Holmes or a confused contestant on the Crystal Maze. From the get-go, Puppet House does not shy away from its campy influences. It knows exactly what it is and leans into it hard. The killer puppet is absurd, the story is pretty predictable, and the dialogue is so cheesy you could melt it on nachos. But that's the charm. This isn't trying to be the next Silent Hill. It's here to entertain you with its B-movie ridiculousness, a vibe that I don't think we have enough of in video games. And while you traverse all the silliness, you're going to be solving a lot of puzzles, like a real lot, most of which I was nowhere near smart enough to handle, but honestly that's more of a reflection on me. This haunted mansion is packed with intricate, mind-bending puzzles that will test every ounce of your problem-solving skills. And these puzzles aren't just throwaway time fillers either, they're impressively woven into the mansion's spooky atmosphere, making every locked door and hidden passage feel like a part of this haunted world. They range from the classic find the missing piece quests, all the way to more complex challenges that involve manipulating the environment in clever ways. Now, for the most part, these puzzles are a lot of fun, particularly if you're better at solving them than me. And I appreciate this is a very low bar, but still. But it is oh so satisfying when you finally crack a particularly hard riddle. And the rush of discovering a new passage or unlocking a creepy room, oh, it's just the best. However, after the first few hours, the novelty does start to wear off a bit. You might find yourself rolling your eyes at yet another puzzle that involves matching symbols or deciphering cryptic notes. It's not that they're bad, it's just that they can get a bit repetitive, especially when they break the flow of the game's spooky pacing. But what saves the gameplay from falling into a monotonous grind is the constant pressure from the game's antagonist, the soul-stealing puppet. While you're busy trying to figure out how to open up that next secret passage, this little Dickens is stalking you. And let me tell ya, this little has a talent for jump scares. It really plays with your nerves, making you feel like the puppet is only one step behind you, even when it's not. It's tense, it's stressful, and it's the perfect contrast to the more relaxed pace of the puzzle solving. So if you're someone who values a rich, multi-layered narrative with deep character arcs, you might be a bit disappointed here. The story of Puppet House is about as deep as a puddle, but that's by design. Detective Rick's investigation into the ventriloquist mansion is really just an excuse to throw you into creepy situations with a killer puppet. And that's totally fine for this type of game. It's the kind of horror experience where the atmosphere does the heavy lifting, not the story. That said, the game does try to flesh out the narrative through environmental storytelling. You'll find newspaper clippings, journal entries, and cryptic notes scattered throughout the mansion, hinting at the dark history behind Peter Hill and his creepy puppet collection. It's enough to give the game some context, but don't expect any shocking plot twists or character development. Rick is basically a cardboard cutout of the grizzled detective archetype, and the puppet, while real spooky, doesn't offer much in the way of personality beyond the whole I will murder you vibes. But honestly, who's playing this for the story? You're here to get creeped out by a puppet and solve some puzzles. And on that front, the game delivers. Where Puppet House really shines is in its atmosphere. The mansion you're stuck in isn't just some generic haunted house. It feels alive, like the walls are watching you. Because they probably are. The developers nailed that retro VHS aesthetic, with grainy textures and eerie lighting that give the whole game a found footage vibe. Every room is filled with unsettling details, from flickering lights to dusty old furniture that looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. That definitely sounds like my student flat. The visual style is clearly inspired by 80s and 90s horror films, and if you grew up watching movies like Puppet Master or Poltergeist, you'll feel right at home. The design of the killer puppet is another highlight too. It's grotesque with exaggerated features that make it look both absurd and terrifying. Kinda like Slappy from Goosebumps, only cranked up to 11. Just seeing it pop up in the corner of your screen is enough to make your skin crawl. Ugh, believe me. For those wondering about the game's length, expect to spend around 8 to 10 hours on your first playthrough, depending on how fast you are with the puzzles. And that's a pretty solid length for a game like this. Long enough to feel satisfying, but not too long that it overstays its welcome. That said, the middle section of the game does drag a little bit, especially when the puzzles start to feel repetitive. But if there's one thing that elevates Puppet House beyond just a puzzle game, it's the sound design. The developers knew exactly how to play with your nerves, using sound to create an oppressive, tension-filled atmosphere. The mansion is filled with creaks, groans, and eerie whispers that make you feel like you're never truly alone. And then there's the puppet. It doesn't just sneak up on you. It announces itself with an unsettling clatter or a high-pitched giggle that will easily send chills down your spine. The music is subtle but effective too. It never overpowers the action, but it's always there, lurking in the background and adding to the sense of dread. The combination of sound and visuals works together to create a deeply immersive experience. So, is Puppet House worth diving into? Well, if you love horror, puzzles, and that sweet retro aesthetic, then yeah, absolutely. The game nails the atmosphere, with creepy visuals and an unsettling soundscape that will keep you on edge. Edge. The puzzles are challenging, and while they can get a bit repetitive, they're satisfying enough to make you want to push through. Plus, who doesn't want to face off against a killer puppet, honestly? But what did you think of Puppet House? Please let me know in the comments below. I would love to read your thoughts. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe for plenty more on all things gaming. Check out our movie channel, UDS Films, or you can always visit upsidedownshark.com to keep up with everything else we've got going on. Until then, my name is Tom, this has been UDS, and we'll see you next time. Bye!